pathways, and then kind of like try to get sections out from midbrain, medulla, pons area, and try to see how they move about, right? Whether they come more midline, they come anteriorly, etc. And while we were doing that, we also passed through some of these cranial nerve nuclei. We started naming some of it, right? Remember, at least we now know 4 of the parasympathetic nuclei for sure. And then some others, their motor nucleus usually will have the same name of the cranial nerve, so it's not going to be too bad. What we had is that we have these 12 cranial nerves, right? Number 1 was the olfactory nerve. It's going to smell for you. That's going to be only sensory. What it is trying to do, just collects the information, brings it to the olfactory cortex. Number 1 cranial nerve will not have a motor function, just the sensory. Number 2 is also just the sensory. That's an optic nerve, right? It sees things for us, or the visual information is collected by the optic nerve. It's going to be going back to the occipital cortex via the lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus. Cranial nerves 3, 4, and 6, right? So oculomotor, trochlear, and abducent nerves, those are going to be the ones controlling the extraocular eye muscles. What we have for them is that depending on, I guess, the level in the back in the brainstem, they will like originate and come reach towards the, I guess, eye. And then what they are trying to do, they are trying to accomplish a motor function, right? They are trying to control the eye muscles. And what we have in the eye, extraocular eye muscles wise, we have these rectus muscles, which are, they are like straight muscles. They either make you look up, look down, sideways, like you abduct the eye or adduct the eye. Remember, abduction, adduction, you bring it out or bring it closer. And then the 2 oblique ones are going to be superior and inferior oblique muscles of the eye. So they are going to be, I guess, making you look into the about like 45-degree angles up and down. Anyhow, number 5 was the trigeminal nerve. It's one of the large ones. It has these 3 bellies in it. That's why the name comes from. It's going to control in 3 parts, I guess, the face, and it's one of the biggest like sensory cranial nerves. And then just one thing, just 1 second. Give me 1 second, please. I think I kept putting it back. Yeah, it is there. So you don't really have to like type anything. I'm just trying to say, because at the very end I have still these tables, so they actually put for you that whether they are motor, sensory, etc. And there's like a silly mnemonic, I'm sure you've heard about it, to memorize how to remember them, whether they are just sensory, just motor, or they are both. Have you guys heard about some mnemonics? Okay, there's like how was it? God. Okay, some say marry money, but my brother says big brains matter most, right? Something like that. So if you look at the first ones, some say marry money, it's like sensory, sensory, motor, motor, and when you have a B, that's both, so it has both motor and sensory ones. If it makes sense, you can remember. If not, please forget about it. Alright. So, and then number 7 was the facial nerve, move the face, taste, salivates, cries. That's one of the large ones, again, very much like the trigeminal nerve. Number 8 is the one coming from the inner ear. It's going to have 2 separate parts. One goes to the cochlea and tries to hear for us. The other goes to the utricle, saccule, and the semicircular canals and try to understand the balance information specifically for the head. Number 9 is glossopharyngeal nerve. That also helps with the small portion of the taste and helps with the salivation. If you remember, that was pretty much like all the salivary glands in my face is controlled by number 7, but only one is controlled by the glossopharyngeal nerve, which was the parotid gland, right? Yeah, the large one. And number 10 is the vagus nerve. It's going to do a bunch of different things. That's the one cranial nerve will come down to the thoracic, I guess, cavity and does a bunch of different stuff. So taste, swallows, lifts the palate, helps with the talking. Number 11, a simple one, turns head, lifts shoulders, right? 12, moves the tongue. That goes to the intrinsic tongue muscle, the hypoglossal nerve. And I guess so what we will do, we'll go through them, I guess. One thing that I want you to kind of pay attention in a sense that in these slides, there is going to be a lot of like GVEs, SVEs, etc. So Dr. Anstrom and I teach the neuro block, the entire whole thing, like block 3. So he teaches these parts when we get there, and then he asks everyone to memorize those SVs, but I don't, okay? Because in the boards, really, you don't necessarily have to answer and pick one. What's general, visual, efferent, sensory? You don't. You just need to understand the function, okay? So, as for now, you don't have to memorize them. So as we go through, just understand that they have these different functions. Some of them are called special, just because they come from, and like some others called general, and the special ones come, like their embryological origin is different. So traditionally, we have to like memorize whether it's SVE, etc., but we don't have to do that. So, what this slide is trying to look at, right? Motor neurons in the anterior column. Let's get a little thing again. Okay, right? So, motor neurons in the anterior column are arranged into nuclear columns, right? As we see over here. So, like, if you are trying to reach to a certain, I guess, muscle, they are all bundled together. Another one is another column. So, not necessarily they have to leave from, like, one level and then exit the spinal cord to go, but if they are eventually going to the same muscle area, they can be coming from different levels, but then the spinal nerves will eventually meet together, right? And then that just shows. So the same idea from the spinal cord, you can apply it to the higher areas, right? You can think about the cranial nerve nuclei. They are the same way. They are arranged in columns in the brainstem, right? So what this one, we all know pretty much right now, right? But we said that there are these visceral, afferents and efferents on either side. So when we say visceral, which ones we are talking about? So these are pretty much the like autonomic nervous system related stuff, right? Remember we said intermediolateral columns on the spinal cord is the one that kind of hosts these things. And then somatic afferents will be kind of entering the spinal cord from the dorsal horn, and these are my somatic efferents residing inside the ventral horns. So, and if we kind of look into the developing spinal cord, they do start with these, I guess, basal plate and alar plate. Again, next semester in embryo, pretty much, you guys will go through all of these again, like neural crest, how the basal plate, alar plate will arrange themselves and how they make it turn, etc. There's a reason, remember, like all of our pathways coming down, for example, they have this twist happens to them. And there's embryological reason for that, but it's going to be covered later. And these things are also always start with in that like orientation, right? Dorsal will be the alar plate, and then ventral will be the basal plate. And between those two, we will try to maintain our motor and sensory neurons, like anterior and posterior in a way, all the times from spinal cord to the brainstem. So this one just shows, bless you, in the developing spinal cord, they are arranged like that. And when I go upwards, right, to the medulla and eventually to the like brainstem, the more, brainstem parts, these things maintain their, I guess, first original orientation. What happens is that you are going to be having maybe like starting the rhomboid fossa will come into the picture, will take place, and then it's going to push things aside. So instead of being just anterior, posterior, they are going to be as well laterally located like this. So in the spinal column, we said that somatic motor neurons are in the ventral, visceral motor neurons in the intermediolateral cell column, right? So all of these will maintain analog positions in the brainstem like they do in the spinal cord. So these things are the ones that I was trying to say. The visceral efferent column of the cells in the brainstem will split into two separate nuclei. They will be in the visceral efferent and special visceral efferent. When you see special efferents, they are the bronchiogenic. They are coming from the branchial arches. Have you guys heard about the branchial arches before? Maybe. So, like the things, for example, develop into our, like the thymus and whatnot develops into the neck area. They are also coming from the branchial arches. So there are like 11 of them, but the 7 is the clinically relevant one. So we try to learn like, okay, branchial arches 3 and 4, if they are not embryologically developing, I have this thing called like 3-4 is DiGeorge syndrome, and then these people will not develop their thymuses and whatnot, right? But it's all embryo. It's not like really neuroscience stuff. So, but anyhow, if you hear this branchiogenic will give you that name of specialness because they come from a different embryological origin. Anyhow, this is the thing that I was trying to say. So this whole slide, you don't have to memorize anything of it because it tries to explain how these, general visceral efferent and special visceral efferent, and at the bottom, general visceral afferent and special visceral afferent will be, located. Anytime we see special, they are the branchiogenic ones. On the next slide, right, you can see how they are listed for you. Okay, so what this is trying to show, again, they always maintain that column-wise, arrangement. What happens is general somatic efferents are the somatic sensation, the ones that we talked about. We are in the periphery and we have our sensory receptors collecting the information, right? Look at this. These fibers carry impulses from the skin and striated muscle spindles. We looked at our spindles before. So anyone cares to remember the type of fibers coming from the muscle spindles? Like 1A, 2, right? Remember, we were like, oh, I wish it was 1A and 1B, but it wasn't. So it's like 1A and 2 muscle spindles. 1B was Golgi. Yes, perfect. Thank you. So these are the things that carry them, and then they are called general somatic afferents. The other one was visceral sensation. So this coming from more like internal organs, right? These are coming from the viscera and especially blood vessels. So any of those like alpha-1 controlled areas by the adrenergic system can be collected into these ones. The next one is visceral motor function, and this is again involuntary control. So anytime visceral something is ANS function, right? So this is going to be general visceral efferents. It goes out to that area and makes like the salivary gland to increase secretion. Maybe I just start eating things, so I need to like stop mixing the food with that. Another one is general somatic efferents, right? Somatomotor function. It innervates the striated muscles. Then in this one, you can think about which ones, like from the spinal cord. The alpha motor neurons, remember, right? The alpha motor neuron goes to the extrafusal fibers and create the contraction for you. So those are going to be in this column. And then we have these special, fiber types, right? Somatic afferents and then special visceral efferents specifically. So as we go, I will try to tell you this, but again, nothing to memorize for this. Just start to have an idea, right? Because again, next year in block 3, he will want you to recite them in a sense, like GVs, SVs, da da da. So, but you'll do it. So, for me, the most important one, so if you listen to this lecture again later, and then you're like, well, what is it, all these columns, she said, like, don't remember this, remember that, I have no idea, right? Please go back to the last 3 slides, because I have these tables over there. If you go through them, it tells you the name, whether it's like sensory or motor, it tells you the function of it, and the name of the nucleus, etc., right? So, again, if you don't want to remember anything, please remember those tables at the end. But I just want to show you still like where they come out in the brainstem. So what happens is, right, these cranial nerve nuclei can come from the motor or the sensory part, right? But what happens is, unlike spinal nerves, CNs are not always a combination of motor and sensory fibers. What else did we say about them? Remember? So they are not just like giving motor output, or they are not just collecting sensory, but there were 4 of them doing some additional function. Remember these numbers? Maybe like some of these. This one, this is not asking the same thing, but I'm asking another question. So remember, 3, 7, 9, and 10, they also have parasympathetic issues with them, right? They can have the parasympathetic arches to go out to the, areas to control. So this is the one. So visceral efferent, parasympathetic fibers, they can have visceral afferent fibers, and then the branchiogenic ones to kind of collect. How about these like oculomotor and then trochlear and abducent nerves? Well, we haven't looked at the table yet, but those are the ones I just said at the very first slide. They are the ones only control those very tiny, eye extraocular muscles. So that's the one that is kind of like trying to talk about. this one, and then like starting with that, it goes through what it is that we are trying to say. This one I try to use and talk about some clinical issue, but that's what I'm going to say over here, right? So if you just look at this picture, right, everything we see is a mirror image. So you can have a line in the middle. This red one is the abducent nucleus, and then the blue, like dark blue one, is the facial nucleus. If you just look at this, right, everything pretty much like nucleus of the solitary tract or the salivary nucleus, so has to do with like the 9 and 10 parasympathetic arches. What happens is, well, they start and then they just like, from the nucleus, the fiber just like directly goes out. But for the facial nucleus, the trajectory that it takes, it just goes around the abducent nucleus and then comes forward like that. That's going to sometimes create problems with these patients, right? So if there's a maybe like tumor growing in the either one of these, like either in the abducent nucleus or it's going to affect the facial nucleus, they are going to be like giving you problems at the same time. Why? Because facial nucleus kind of like wraps around, not the nucleus itself, but the fibers wraps around the abducent nucleus, the nucleus itself, right? And then the abducent nucleus is wrapped by the facial nerve. So either one of them growing tumor or something is pushing, the symptoms you will see is going to have those two problems. So remember, abducent nerve job is to make you like abduct the eye. If my abducent nerve, let's say on this eye, is problem, what my eye is going to look like? I cannot abduct my eye, so I'm going to look into my nose all the time with this one, right? Like this. So when I have that, it's very likely that I can have some facial nerve issues as well. Those could be, right, maybe the motor innervation to my face is not right, and I'm going to have like maybe, I won't be able to like, you know, smile or do things with my face and like control the side of my lips, etc. So just please remember, like the way that they are arranged is not just straight, you have the nucleus and the fibers leave, but there's a loop around, it affects what happens to it. All right. So what I want to do, like kind of group them together and show them in the brainstem where they start from, and then we can look at them together. So we said number 3, 4, and 6 are the cranial nerves for the extraocular eye muscles. So they provide the general somatic afferents, the efferent fibers. They are motor fibers, right? So what happens is, these are going to be, I guess, midline of the brainstem, right in the middle, right? Pretty much. Over here we have the abducent nerves. I can come back here, right? So oculomotor nerves are here. Usually these are the ones in the cadavers, the hardest one to see. If you don't properly cut them before you remove the brain, right? What's going to happen? You're going to rip them apart, and always everybody looks for, where are the oculomotor nerves? Well, yeah, you just rip them apart. You pull them too harsh, but we try to find them. So those are like the skinniest ones that are usually hard to find. But what happens is that they are very much midline, as you can see, right? And then the nucleus of trochlear nerve, the way that they are arranged is pretty straightforward, right? Superior to inferior, you come down and like 1 and 2 not necessarily have anything in the brainstem, right? I just have sensory, so I collect them from the front of my face, bring them backwards. So the numbering starts really from 3, and then 4, 5, 6, I go kind of backwards. So oculomotor nerves are pretty much like midline. Where I have them, it's in the midbrain to pons communication part. Trochlear nerve now resides in the superior portion of the pons area. And when I come down specific for this one, right? So these big ones on the side are the trigeminal nerve, number 5. And then I have these abducent nerves, number 6. But they're all pretty much midline. Again, oculomotor is at the midbrain pons communication area. And then the trochlear nerve is at the upper portions of the pons. And then I have the abducent nerve is between medulla and the pons, like kind of right in that level. So there are these other ones. These are 7 and 8 right over here. We are going to look at them in a second, right? So one thing that we already talked about, in addition to them being the general somatic efferent fibers, remember number 3 oculomotor has a parasympathetic arch as well, and we said Edinger-Westphal nucleus is the parasympathetic nucleus for the oculomotor nerve, right? So it's going to how they are arranged. And then what happens again, because of the embryological pattern, how they like these things develop, right? Edinger vessel is what? It's a visceral efferent fiber. Why visceral? Well, it's trying to do a parasympathetic job on a gland, so it's a visceral thing. And then it's an efferent fiber because it brings the orders to the gland to, do something. And then it's going to be located immediately lateral to the motor nucleus. This comes from the very first slide. It talks about where the columns are, right? So the rule is supposed to be like that. But it's not lateral to the motor nucleus of 3, it's immediately medial. So this is like a sort of an exception to the rule. If you want to remember, you can remember, right? Because we didn't spend so much time on the first one, maybe this doesn't make sense, but when you sit down, you can look at it again. So this is just the thing that it's trying to say. So visceral oculomotor nucleus, these blue ones, right? And then the red ones are the motor nucleus. What happens is that these blue ones are supposed to be on the outside, just following the embryological pattern coming from the spinal cord upwards here, but it's not. It's just, again, has to do with a little bit of the twist happens in this area. So not too bad. Oculomotor has an additional parasympathetic, that's what is more important for us to remember. And then the trigeminal nerve, as we said, it sits right in the mid portion of the pons. It's very easy to see. Even if you didn't cut the cranial nerves before you remove the brain, you will always see that large chunk of it. It's one of the easiest ones to recognize. Sometimes when we tag the cadavers for the practical exam, if we cannot figure out something okay, we need 2 more questions, we're like, well, this was really a hard exam, to give them something easy. We always tag the trigeminal because it's obvious. Yeah, trigeminal. And if you miss it, we'll come find you, right? Okay, it is trigeminal. You need to sleep with it, etc. It's very, very obviously easy to see it, right? And if you look at it, if you really cut it nicely, it's not going to look something like this, but you can actually see these 3, belly separating itself, because they're all really trying to cover the 3 portions of your face, in that manner, all right? So, again, the organization on this one is fine, where the, sensory and motor fibers are supposed to sit down, okay? So, the most fibers of these trigeminal nerve is somatic afferents, meaning that trigeminal, even though it has an efferent, meaning motor function, it's the biggest, sensory collector for our face, right? So if you have to pick some things, which of the cranial nerves is the biggest motor supplier for your face, is going to be the facial nerve, right? Who is the biggest, sensory collector for the face is going to be the trigeminal nerve. You can remember it like that. So anyhow, so most of these fibers are somatic afferent, and then these pseudo-unipolar neurons, and remember, a lot of the things we talked about, any sensory information we collected, they always come to the pseudo-unipolar neurons residing in the dorsal root ganglia. So the same idea follows upwards for this one. So these neurons are sitting in the trigeminal ganglion. That's another one, sometimes we tag it. It's not as easy to recognize, but trigeminal ganglion is large as well, right? But anyhow, so these fibers innervate the skin of the face, mucosa of the oral cavity, and then the tongue, right? Sensory stuff. And then it has also the visceral efferent one. So it comes from the motor nucleus, and the motor nucleus is right here, more midline, right? The blue dot that we see. What's going to happen? It's going to come, and then it's going to, innervate the skeletal muscles of the face. One thing that you can say, muscles of mastication is controlled by the trigeminal nerve, the lowest branch. What happens? Muscles of mastication means it's the muscles of chewing, right? So muscles of facial expression is facial nerve, so you can smile, get upset, etc. Muscles of mastication for chewing is provided by the trigeminal nerve, right? So again, not a big deal, but this tries to separate the 2 things. Just for later purposes, when we get to the table, I'll say a little more. But what it says is that the sensory collection, very similar to the pathways that we talked about before for the body, is similar in trigeminal nerve. Because why? Well, the, position, vibration, and also pain and temperature are different sensations, right? And if you remember, we kind of collected them separately. So what's going to happen, for example, when we talk about the tongue, right? We say that anterior 2/3 of the tongue, taste sensation, which is a special sensation collected by the facial nerve, posterior 1/3 is collected by the glossopharyngeal nerve, and anything left behind, like around the epiglottis area, is collected by the vagus nerve. So like 7, 9, 10 collects it, anterior 2/3, posterior 1/3, and the rest, taste-wise. But that's not the whole, I guess, sensation you can get from your tongue, right? What else you can do? Well, maybe like you drink a very hot tea. Yeah, it has a taste to it, but it's also very, very hot. How you collect the hotness of it? It's going to be in the trigeminal nerve, right? That's why it talks about over here. So pain and temperature touch, and then touch of like to the skin, kind of like vibration-wise touch is different things. So it's going to be collected in different things. Sometimes, yeah, sorry, yeah. Mastication. It's just some sensations we consider special, and there's no like reason for it. Not because like you think it's special. It's just how they develop makes them special. Does that make sense? Embryologically, where they come from makes them special or not. It's not because like we think it's a special activity or some sort, right? Yeah. So it's just embryologically determined. So again, when you look into this table at the very end, it will hopefully give you a better summary. But what I'm trying to say, sometimes the questions, because we all memorize it, okay, anterior 2/3, posterior 1/3, facial, glossopharyngeal, etc. But sometimes they formulate the question, they're not asking you the taste, they just say like, you have this very hot soup or tea that you drank, and then where would you collect this information? You need to remember that it's a, I guess, pain and temperature of the same area is collected by trigeminal nerve. It's not facial and glossopharyngeal, and then you need to bring that to the, I guess, spatial area collecting that information by the trigeminal nerve, not necessarily the other two. Anyhow, we are just kind of moving along. We looked at 6 being abducent nerve for the eye, so from 5 we switched to 7, like in this slide. 7 is also very like complex. There's a lot happening. We already said that the facial nucleus have to make this turn around the abducent nerve, right? And again, there's another thing that sometimes there are these uncal hernias that can happen, like the uncus will herniate from where it is. The one place it's going to push is like oculomotor nerve on its trajectory, and there are like 2 other special tumors that they grow and then they push against this area, affect 7 and 6 at the same time. So, but anyhow, so the facial nucleus contains motor neurons supplied to the muscles of facial expression, as I said. And then, because they come from the mesodermopharyngeal arch, they are considered as special visceral efferents. So they are special motor functioning parts. So facial expression is an important thing. Superior salivatory nucleus will have the visceral efferents. They go to the salivary glands. Salivary glands are part of like the sort of visceral, because it's part of, in a sense, that GI system. So we always have visceral efferents going to those, right? And again, remember, the number 7 would have the parasympathetic arch, and this is the part that we were trying to talk about. The other one, nucleus of the solitary tract, will collect now the sensory part of the number 7. Number 7, even though it's a big motor supplier, it has a sensory arch as well, right? So special visceral afferents will be involved with the taste. Taste, again, is considered as a special sensation. And then another one is that facial nerve will also carry somatic afferents, right? So it's not visceral. Does it make sense? Visceral afferent is just the taste sensation. It's a special taste sensation. It also carries other afferents, like sensory stuff comes back, but it's somatic, so it's coming from the skin near the ear, so that fibers will synapse with the trigeminal sensory nuclei. This thing over here, again, it's going to be important. When we look closer to the, I guess, ear, for example, we will look into these areas that just passes by to the external auditory meatus and internal auditory meatus, and number 7 and 10 passes closer to those areas. Sometimes, like in pediatric patients, for example, if you're just a brand new doctor, like, oh, hi, you know, how cute, and etc., you're just like already nervous trying to impress the mom, etc., you grab this, like, you know, tip for your otoscope, you put it in, you jammed it into the kid's ear, the kid, like, you know, fainted on you. the reason being is that some of the vagus nerve fibers passes by and you pushed on them, it created bradycardia, the kid didn't get blood into their brain. I mean, it's transient, but you'll never see that parent again, right? It's the first and the last time you see them. So things like that. Anatomically, where it passes by is going to affect like what they collect back to these areas. Anyhow, did not happen to me, but happened to a friend. I'm just saying. It's always like, yeah. So, really, it did not happen to me, I promise. But it is the thing that I always like try to joke about when we talk about the anatomy of these things. Anyhow, after that, number 8 is the one really just sensory, because we said it's coming from the ear, inner ear. It collects balance and hearing information. So now the next one with the bunch of motor and parasympathetic issues is glossopharyngeal nerve. In that one again, we have efferent and afferent fibers, right? So the inferior salivatory nucleus, we mentioned this before. This is a visceral efferent fibers. They innervate the salivary glands. So this was the one kind of like helping with the parasympathetic effect that we talk about. Nucleus ambiguus was, remember, shared by 9 and 10 together. So special visceral efferents will sit in there. They have to do with the swallowing effect, because swallowing is a big deal. I think in GI phys, bless you, we'll talk about it. There are so many different areas that you have to be controlling, so it doesn't go up, it doesn't go too much anterior, but it just goes into the esophagus, so it's a big deal. And glossopharyngeal nerve will help with some of it. And inferior superior ganglion will have the somatic afferent innervation to the tongue and palate, right? And then it's going to be combining eventually with the trigeminal nerve, because again, trigeminal is the biggest sensory collector. It's going to collect some of this information. Nucleus of the solitary tract is again the visceral afferent one, but it's a special because we are still collecting the taste information. Anytime taste is a special one. And then the inferior portion of this nucleus is the termination for visceral afferent fibers. They are bringing the chemo and pressure receptors. So again, if it's just specialized or like coming from the branchial arches, it's a special, like taste is one of them. But you also collect bunch of other information, right? Physiological parameters, sensory-wise. So let's say like depending on baroreceptors around that area is going to be collected into glossopharyngeal nerve again. And then vagus nerve is the next big one. It again has bunch of afferent and efferent, like motor and sensory fibers. So it shares nucleus ambiguus with glossopharyngeal nerve. What happens is that we are going to use this area for swallowing, I guess, motor output to go. And then dorsal vagal nucleus is the parasympathetic for this, and it's going to go down all the way to like splanchnic, I guess, area. So it's going to control, for example, the branches of it will go down to your heart. When we talk about like bradycardic effect, it's going to come from that vagus nerve kind of like coming down. And then the nucleus of the solitary tract. So we are in this like big bundle using, and the upper portions were, you know, the motor fibers are still like, you know, coming down, I guess, laterally. And now we are sharing the upper and lower portions with the number 9. But anyhow, the inferior portion is going to be special, so it's going to come down to larynx and pharynx and collecting, I guess, the physiological sensory information. And somatic general afferents, these are again sensory stuff, but this is going to come and collect very small area of the skin near the ear. That was the one that I was trying to talk about, right? So these are going to be communicated eventually with the trigeminal nerve, because that's the final kind of combining area. And the last one is the special visceral afferent. Again, please don't remember which one is like this or that, but just look at the functions. So not the names, whether it's special or general, don't worry about them, but just try to learn what it is they're trying to do. And then these, I guess, visceral afferents will be collected into the nucleus of solitary tract. And the last two are going to be accessory and hypoglossal nerves, right? Number 11 and 12 now. The accessory nerve is pretty straightforward. What it is trying to do, it's going to try to control the sternocleidomastoid muscle and then the trapezius muscle, right? So they are just going to bring in the somatic efferent fibers to, you know, like, so so you can do the like head turning. And now I put it sideways. And then the last one is the hypoglossal nerve. This, I guess, brings the intrinsic tongue muscles, right? So about this, maybe if we have time in the future, usually the what is it called? The cerebellum basal ganglia, like disorders lecture is short. Sometimes I use that lecture. I mean, if it's not such a busy week, we can look at some videos. And for this one specifically, we can look at videos because a lot of the times, all these cranial nerves are like two-sided, right? I have a right and a left things. But for some couple of those, it's not necessarily if I were to innervate the right side and try to do something, right? Like if I protrude my tongue out, it's not just the same side, it's gonna move to the side, it's going to be opposite. But I'm gonna show you videos of how we can do the exam. Anyhow, right? So it comes out from the hypoglossal nucleus and goes to the muscles of the tongue. So the muscles of the tongue are really easy when you do the dissections, like obvious, you can see like those 3 layers, but next year is coming. So if the previous, all these stuff were like special this, general that, like what did she say? Here is the, I guess, a listing of that. Again, do not memorize, but just look at them, that they are, they could be different. Because what it means, when you hear somatic efferent, they are trying to innervate the skeletal muscle, right? If it's a special visceral efferent, they innervate the skeletal muscle derived from these branchial or pharyngeal arches, right? So, and not all of them, but some of them have these special ones. And then the visceral efferent means it's a motor function, but it goes to the visceral organs. That's why it has to be a parasympathetic. So involuntarily controlled stuff that the body controls. So list. And then this is another list of where they are originating from. Again, all the nuclei and whatnot. I listed them for you here. What I like really is these 3 slides because it pretty much summarizes everything, but it goes in a better systematic way so you can actually read through those things. And I have only 3 minutes left. What I will do, maybe just start talking about it, but I'm going to go through that table, the last 2 slides. So we will do them later. I'm not going to take time. But this one also, what it's trying to do, in the same color coding that we have here, if something is like somatic motor, you will find it here as a somatic motor in like that pink or the red color. And if it's like orange, it's a branchial motor that is going to be a special visceral efferent. And then you will see if that specific nerve has that branchial arch, then it's going to have that orange thing, right? So it's like a color-coded way to follow it. What did we say? The easy one, the somatic motor one, these are the somatic efferents going out to control, right? Extraocular muscles, we said, these were like 3, 4, and 6. And then intrinsic tongue muscles, it's going to be number 12. And then oculomotor, trochlear, abducent, right? 3, 4, 6. And then the hypoglossal nerve, these are the general somatic efferents. We also said that these could be special visceral efferents. And we said as we go, muscles of mastication, facial expression, they have to be, or considered as special. And middle ear structures, this is like the dorsal portion of it, how it covers. Pharynx, larynx, sternomastoid, upper portion of the trapezius are under this. Within the middle ear, we are going to talk about these 2 little tiny muscles, right? And they are going to be controlled with trigeminal and facial nerves. Their job is going to be, if you remember from undergrad years, you have the 3 sections in your ear. You have the external, middle, and inner ear, right? So the middle ear are going to have these tiny little bones, malleus, incus, stapes, right? And also, Dr. Enstrom and I have this tiny little, it's not a bucket because it's so tiny. We have this little container. Every year some groups are able to properly dissect, so they find the perfect stapes. It's just so tiny. We collect them. And my hope is that, I'm just joking, but when Dr. Enstrom retires, I'll make him a necklace or something. They are so tiny and cute, but they are very, very tiny. Still, their job in the middle ear is to hold on with these 2 specialized muscles, right? So they are going to try to hold on to the bones, and then the vibrations coming from the external ear are not going to be transferred into the inner ear with that high capacity. If needed, if you just went to a big, I don't know, rock concert, but you're just a student, so you buy the cheapest ones there, like right next to the speakers, that the whole night is like, it's in your ears. The next morning you are going to have ear pain, right? Why? Because the whole night your tiny little muscles in your middle ear were trying to hold on to those bones so that like those huge vibrations were not going into your inner ear. So things like that. But it's coming in that next slide. Let's look at this bottom one and then we'll stop. And then we said if something is yellow on the coming tables, is going to be parasympathetic. So that's a general visceral efferent. You're still sending out motor fibers, but it's going to the visceral organs. That's why it's parasympathetic. So it's not the somatic nerve, right? Now we have a good idea. Somatic nerves are like upper motor neuron, lower motor neuron leaves. It's somatic nerve, goes to the muscle. If it's ANS control, then what I have? Well, I have this preganglionic, postganglionic thing goes to my target area, and those are like the visceral stuff. Anyhow, what we said was Edinger vessel was for oculomotor nerve, superior salivatory for facial nerve, inferior salivatory for glossopharyngeal, and then I have the dorsal motor nucleus of vagus. Even though it says dorsal motor nucleus of vagus, it's still the parasympathetic branch, so it's for the vagus nerve. All right. All right, I have 8:50. Let's stop here. We will talk about these 2 slides and then continue next time. Right? I think next week we'll talk about this. Thank you, guys.